Some news just broke a few moments ago. Kellyo, let me start with you. President Trump taking to social media, confirming what a lot of folks suspected, that he did not make, nor does he have, any tapes with James Comey. What else, if anything, is the White House saying about this? And have they said why the president might have tried to lead folks to believe that he did?
The White House has said nothing so far. This is the president on the leading edge of putting out his own story, and shortly we expect to have a recorded audio-only briefing with Sarah Sanders, the principal deputy spokesperson here at the White House, and so expect these questions will be asked. The president had foreshadowed it himself, saying the answer would come soon, very soon, and suggested that people would be, quote, disappointed by the outcome, which you could interpret in a number of different ways. Disappointed that he had held up the possibility of tapes and there are none, or disappointed that he had not made a recording where he could refute, if it's true to refute, the statements given under oath by James Comey, the former FBI director. So the president, in a course of 2 tweets, so he used 2 tweets to say no tapes. With all the recently reported electronic surveillance, intercepts, unmasking, and illegal leaking of information, I have no idea whether there are, quote, tapes or recordings of my conversations with James Comey. But I did not make and do not have any such recordings. So here the president still leaves open the possibility that someone recorded his conversations with James Comey. Seems like an added piece in this tweet denial that sort of stands out as sort of an unusual way to say that he himself did not make recordings. But this is sort of fitting with the voice of President Donald Trump, still saying the things that are in his mind. He makes the point about unmasking. He makes the point about illegal leaks. Those have been stones in his shoes since he came into office. Frustrated, even angry perhaps, about those instances where he believes the government sourcing of people saying things about his administration, unmasking that he has alleged, which is when there is a revealing of a name in a classified document, when there is an intercept of conversations with a foreign person. So, bottom line, no Comey tapes. That leaves James Comey's sworn testimony as the only thing we have on the record. We've got the president in several interviews taking issue with some of the things James Comey said, but there will be no tail of the tape. Craig?
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me, or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.